Riley, really?
With the lieutenant governor.
With the Riley Scholarship.
No, the holiday.
You ready?
Oh, Diwali. Sorry.
Good
Yes,
morning,
yes.
everybody.
Yes. Yes. No, Dr. Rai was actually there.
My name is Cassie Motz. I think we're ready to get started. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Cassie Motz. I'm the chair of the Maryland Higher Education Commission. We are gathered today for this morning's public hearing. I am joined by most of my fellow commissioners. Of the commission of 11, 10 will be participating today. We expect 7 in person and 3 remotely. We already have 7 of us in person. No, 6 of us in person. You're not a commissioner, you're a secretary. So with me so far this morning, we have Commissioner Williams, Vice Chair Agu, Commissioner Howe, Commissioner Thompson, and Commissioner Burnham. And joining us remotely, we have Commissioner Dukes, and I see Commissioner Tabor Stalen and Commissioner Serrano. We also are expecting Commissioner Warmack to be joining us. So right now we are at 9. Our student commissioner, Commissioner Robinson, is unable to join us today. So that is the call to order. Moving on to the remarks from the secretary and me, I would like to start by commending the secretary and his entire team, particularly the Office of Student Financial Assistance Director, Mr. Al Dorset, for an excellent presentation on Friday morning. We did a live, virtual, statewide financial aid open house. It was the first of its kind. We had 180 people watching live, and I'm told that as of this morning, we've had 829 people watch it online. So there was a lot of really exciting information that MHEC was able to share, and I really commend the secretary and his team for turning the ship with respect to getting rid of the bureaucracy and red tape that has plagued this agency in the past, and really making us be student-focused and making sure that students are able to get the financial aid to which they're entitled. So thank you very much, Secretary Rai, for a great financial aid open house. That I also wanted to announce that we are very happy at the Higher Education Commission to have a new principal counsel, Ms. Kimberly Ward, who is a proud graduate of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and Wake Forest Law School, has spent most of her career in the Attorney General's office. She was also the Workers' Compensation Commissioner, not an easy task. And we are so lucky that she applied for this job and was selected. And we are also very grateful to Soma Kadia, who had been and still is the other lawyer in the office, the Assistant Attorney General. They are a wonderful team. We're happy to be fully staffed with our lawyers, and just wanted to say welcome to Ms. Ward.
Thank you.
With that, I will turn it over to Secretary Rai for his opening remarks.
So thank you, Chair Martz, and thank you all commissioners and everyone who is joining us this morning. We are delighted to be here, and we have some really interesting topics to cover. Let me start with some good news on enrollment. Enrollment throughout the state for the last several years have been going down. Finally, that situation is turning, and you look at the graph here. Almost all sectors are showing growth, and this semester, I think, after many years, we see these lines going upward. Especially if you look at the blue line, that represents our 16 outstanding community colleges. They have shown pretty significant growth. That's very important because that's where large number of our first generation students access higher education. So I see our good friend Brad Phillips from MAC here in the audience. I want to thank you for all the good work that's happening there, and all other higher education sectors here. So this is a good news, but we don't want to be too happy. We need to continue to work hard and look at how we can provide access to more students. Data says still that we have thousands of students who are not accessing higher education after high school in our state. So we have to turn that around. And the students who are seeking higher education, for every one student who's staying in Maryland, 2 are not staying in Maryland. So that ratio is not good. So we have to continue to work hard so that we can make higher education accessible to our students. And right here at home, we have outstanding institutions of higher education. We have nationally known academic programs, and probably one of the most affordable higher education in the country. And once the students leave our state, they pay at least twice more, right? And you have, this is more affordable and much higher quality higher education in the state of Maryland. And with the permission from my boss, I have appointed myself as the chief recruiter for the state of Maryland. So we need to continue to work. Very thankful to our chair for suggesting the idea of financial aid open house, and coming to work with us on Friday that day, and staying with us for several hours. And again, several hours of planning. So, Chair, we thank you for all your contributions. We need to have a financial aid available to our students. Financial barrier is one of the biggest barrier for our students. So having money available, but the access to money should be easier too. So all these bureaucracy that our chair mentioned, we are trying to make it easier. And the entire process of accessing the financial resources should be enjoyable for students. It should not be another burden, right? And we want the students to keep all their energy not in application process, but keep it so that when you go to colleges, use that on your math homework or English homework. So we want to make that easier for our students. The other event that's very important one is coming on December 4th. As you know, several of our campuses, whether it's Bowie State University, Frostburg, Salisbury, Morgan, they have faced gun violence on their campuses. So in collaboration with the University System of Maryland and support from our chair, we are hosting a campus safety summit on December 4th in Baltimore, where we have invited all the leaders of all institutions, and we highly encourage everyone to attend, where we'll talk about best practices for keeping our students safe, certainly from gun violence and other kind of violence too. But we will also talk about how to create more inclusive campus, right? Gun violence is one thing, but there are other kind of inequities that needs to be removed as well. So that's going to be, again, a wonderful day for us, and we're looking forward to that. As you know, we are talking about how to set up state completion goals for the next 10 years. We are working with HCM strategies, and a group of us are going to a peer learning activity on December 5th, I believe. And very happy that Commissioner Raghu is joining us in that effort. And my colleague from Department of Labor, Secretary Portia Wu, and others will be joining that group. So whatever we do will be a collaborative effort between certainly higher education, Department of Labor, and Commerce as well. So stay tuned. More to come in that area as well. I also want to welcome our Principal Counsel, Kimberly Ward Smith. We're so delighted to have her. And our other attorney, Soma Kedia, she's the happiest person in this building. So I want to thank Soma for really doing tremendous amount of work. Legally, we were very active for the last several months, as you know, for all different reasons. But we reached out to her during all times of the day, and sometimes evening, sometimes late evening, sometimes weekend, and she supported us with a smile. So thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rai. I also want to note for the record that Commissioner Wormack is with us. Good morning. So we are now at 10 of our 11 and participating. Any public comments? I don't think we received any. We usually get them in advance. All right. Our first agenda item was to have been discussion about the program approval process and giving our feedback to the work group. And this commission and this agency, Dr. Rai, we have a lot of ideas and recommendations that we're looking forward to sharing with the work group. We're grateful that Dr. Rai is a part of the work group. We're going to table this item until a future meeting of this commission and talk more about it later. So for now, we're going to skip to the next agenda item, but just wanted everyone who happens to be tuning in from home or their offices that this is a topic of great interest to all of us at the Higher Education Commission, and we're very focused on reform. I think there's a consensus statewide and certainly among those of us on the commission that reform is needed, and we are very happy to be part of the process. So look forward to a future discussion of that item. We'll now move to our next agenda item, which is an update on the Blueprint for Maryland's Future.
Nope, there we go. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. I've been asked to provide a quick overview and where we are in terms of implementing the blueprint, particularly from the higher education perspective. So I'm happy to share these slides, but these slides have been kind of shared in a variety of domains. As you know, just some background information, there was a Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, often called the Kirwan Commission, which started in 2016. Through this commission, there were policy recommendations to enable Maryland's education system to perform at the level of the world's best system. So very clear that Maryland is to be competing at a global level. Certainly, the commission reviewed and recommended updated funding formulas. There was a 2018 preliminary report, technical supplements, a 2019 interim report, and then ultimately a 2020 report. So lots of information in terms of how the commission came to the recommendations that they did and the information that informed those recommendations. Ultimately, several pieces of legislation resulted in these recommendations, and in particular, legislation from 2021 and 2022 that implemented a variety of these recommendations. One of the pieces of legislation is more than 300 pages long, as many of you know, and really is an expansive overhaul in terms of pre-kindergarten, early childhood education, all the way through high school and college and career readiness into a pathway either for college or for apprenticeship or for both. And House Bill 13 contains the majority of the policy and funding recommendations. Part of that created an Accountability Implementation Board, now often called AIB. The board is to evaluate data submitted to it and assess how well many of the components of the blueprint are working to achieve the desired outcome. By January 1st and each year through 2031, the board is to review the use of school-level expenditures, including poverty grants and special education funding, and monitor system compliance with the requirements of the blueprint. So AIB really is truly an accountability implementation board. It's a 7-member board, all appointed by the governor with 6-year terms. November 15th was their first board meeting, and they've met regularly since then, and they're authorized to exist until 2032. So there is an end goal, because this is all about implementation to address inequities and improve our pre-K through 12 educational system. So with that, AIB came up with their own implementation plan. They developed a blueprint for Maryland's future. This plan was released last year. And then what was expected was that every unit of government responsible for implementing any part of this plan needed to submit their own plan. If we don't submit our plan, the board has the authority to withhold funding, and so this is important certainly for our agency, but as well as our local education agencies and other stakeholders that are engaged and involved with the implementation. Initial plans were due this past March, and we submitted our plan, and our plan is up on their website in case you want to look at it. The big plan, the overall implementation plan, separates the requirements into 5 big categories: early childhood education, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, college and career readiness, more resources for students to be successful, and of course, governance and accountability. MHEC and higher ed really fit into the first 3 items. Early childhood education, we fit in primarily for the purposes of preparing professionals for the early childhood education workforce and what that looks like. Obviously, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, that is in our wheelhouse to prepare teachers and leaders within our school districts. And then, of course, what it means to be college and career ready. We've played an important role in recent months, and I'll give you some updates on that in a minute. So in our MHEC implementation plan, there are some agency-specific initiatives that we as an agency are expected to do. First and foremost is implementing the Teacher Fellows Scholarship. The blueprint increased funding, requires specific outreach, attempts to diversify the teaching pipeline, clarifies eligibility and criteria. There is an annual report due every year around diversity metrics, rejected applications, and expenditures. The blueprint also requires the agency to assist individuals with a loan assistant repayment program for public school teachers. So as part of the blueprint initiatives to expand and diversify the teacher pipeline, they created a loan assistant repayment program. So our agency, as the years go on, we are supposed to provide technical assistance to teachers seeking that loan assistance at the state level. Additionally, the Teacher Quality Diversity Program, which is a grant program to institutions, has been implemented, and the blueprint created specific funding for it. Again, we have to provide technical assistance to colleges, create outreach and awareness opportunities, and again, a primary component of the Teacher Quality Diversity Program is to increase the diversity of our teacher workforce. There is an annual report that the agency is expected to submit starting in 2024. And again, these are grants that go to the institutions to help them diversify the teacher workforce in a variety of ways, whether that's recruitment, specialized training, working closely with the local education agencies, and the like, in terms of demand and workforce. So those are agency-specific initiatives that we are required to do. There are also initiatives that we have to do in coordination with other organizations, state agencies, and the like. So again, early childhood education, looking at alternative certification pathways for individuals interested in that profession, and working with MSDE in terms of what that certification looks like and how our colleges can implement those pathways for students and professionals to pursue. Of course, recruiting high quality and diverse teacher candidates. This is not an MHEC only initiative. This really requires partnership with several stakeholders, MHEC being one of them, but of course, Maryland State Department of Education, of course, our colleges and universities, and often forgotten, the LEAs, to figure out what they need, who they need, and the expertise that they need in the classroom. So recruiting high quality and diverse teacher candidates is really a collaborative initiative. Alternative teacher pathways is something that the blueprint has opened the doors to. So MSDE is currently considering the apprenticeship model for teacher preparation. Apprenticeship model with a capital A, or registered apprenticeships with capital R, capital A, have very specific requirements, and that is exactly what MSDE is looking into in collaboration with Department of Labor. These registered apprenticeships, in the formal sense, includes both on-the-job training as well as related instruction. So really, an individual would get hired by a school district from day one. They'd work in the classroom and at the same time be working towards their related instruction and ultimately earn a credential that allows them to be a teacher in the profession. So apprenticeship programs, that's in the early stages. Again, higher ed plays a role in terms of that related instruction and what our campuses can provide. And then, of course, paraprofessionals into the teacher pathways and what that looks like in terms of credentialing and what our colleges and universities can do. In this context, as well as the early childhood education, a good example to think about is the Montessori model. The Montessori model has very specific training modules for an individual to work in a Montessori school, and those paraprofessional into teacher pathways play a critical role in terms of that kind of specialized educational opportunities. Then, of course, college readiness standards. This is, of course, a coordinated effort, not just an MHEC effort, and again, with our colleges and universities, MSDE, and our local high schools. Hold that thought for a minute because I want to give you a few more updates, particularly in recent weeks, around college readiness standards. The last thing that our agency is required to do is a number of collaborative reports regarding recruitment for teachers. That is annual and starts this next year. And then, of course, a report around quality and diversity of our teacher pathways that is in collaboration with both MSDE and the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center, and that's annually on July 1st. Let me share a bit more about current work, things that are literally happening either today, this week, or this month. Our agency has been very active in participating in the Outcomes Work Group under AIB. Because so much of this is metric-based, how we are performing as a state, how our LEAs are performing, we need to have a very robust conversation about the outcomes. And this is getting really tricky quite quickly. What are the measures for success, and what's the relevant data for those measures? So, for example, we can talk about the teacher pipeline. What is success? We know that encouraging students to go into the teaching profession is challenging. We have these scholarships to help incentivize students, but that may not be the end-all be-all. So what is a good measure of students engaging in the teaching pipeline and enrolling in teaching programs? And then what's the relevant data that we need for that? The challenge there, for example, is that you may have a student interested in a science field. They're also interested in becoming a teacher, a biology teacher in high school. That student may not be visible because their primary program of study is biology, and their secondary program of study is teacher certification. So with the help of our research staff, and I know, Dr. Schmertz just left, she has been working very closely with the education deans and directors in developing a specialized data collection just on teacher preparation so that we have visibility into those students going through the teacher pipeline. And then we can pass that off to MLDS and use that information to inform these metrics. So that's just one example of many of the other metrics. And so you can imagine all of the K through 12 metrics that need to exist around ability to read, ability to be successful for 9th grade, what those look like, diversity issues, and the like. We have a re-energized coordinated effort with MSDE for teacher preparation and career pathways. Secretary Rai and I were able to meet with the new interim superintendent just about a week ago and had a very fruitful discussion about opportunities for our agencies to collaborate on this. We take the stance, the agency takes the stance, that MSDE in many ways is a licensing board in the context of teacher certification. They are the content experts. They know what criteria students need to meet to be a successful teacher in the classroom. So our agency really is there to assist that work and make sure our colleges and universities align and are at the table and you have the right people there to talk about things like internship hours. That's been a big issue over the past couple of years. How do a student that is full-time at minimum 12 credits, how do you pull them out from that full-time schedule to go and be in the classroom 5 days a week for their internship? So there's scheduling issues, and so making sure that our education deans and directors are talking with MSDE about that coordinated effort. So we help, and we really are coordinator in that work. We've had renewed discussions with MSDE regarding dual enrollment and transfer of credit. As part of Blueprint, when a student is deemed college and career ready at the end of 10th grade, they are supposed to be automatically given the opportunities to enroll in dual enrollment, CTE, AP, a whole bunch of other post 10th grade opportunities. Dual enrollment is a great opportunity, but there may be some confusion in terms of how our LEAs navigate that with our community colleges. And even more important, and hold this thought to the next presentation, how those dual enrollment credits get transferred. So it's one thing for the student to earn that dual enrollment credit in high school. It's another thing for them to try to transfer it post high school graduation. So again, a collaborative and coordinated effort, and those have been just recently renewed discussions in the past couple of weeks, and I actually have a meeting with them tomorrow to continue that dialogue, see what kind of guidance we need to give out, and how we make sure that students really have all the opportunities to be successful, not just in high school, but post high school as well. Working with Department of Labor around technical policy support for apprenticeship pathways. Again, as those post-CCR pathways become more concrete and more available, the idea of youth apprenticeship and apprenticeship opportunities, particularly when it comes to related instruction, making sure that students have every opportunity to be successful and can carry that credit with them into their next career pathway. So providing technical policy support with Department of Labor. Certainly teacher fellow scholarship data. I asked Mr. Dorsett, our Director of Office of Student Financial Assistance, to give us the most recent data, so I apologize. I'm reading this off my phone because it's literally hot off the presses. So for the 2023-2024 academic year, we had 321 students awarded for the teacher fellows. 314 of those students accepted the award, and 229 of those students were certified. So there's a couple of time lapses there, but that's to say we have about 200 to 300 students regularly interested and eligible to receive this. And so that's 200 students going into the teaching profession in the next 2 to 3 years with little to no debt. That's the big thing with this teacher fellowship. It also has a service requirement that students are expected to teach within Maryland, so they can't take this fellowship out of state. And so it keeps our graduates here and meeting the needs of our local education agencies.
Dr. Dow, may I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
That fellowship is a fantastic deal, and I think probably not as well known as it could be. I know MHEC is working on outreach efforts, but I'm wondering in the interim, before we have our outreach team fully built out, is there coordination with the schools of education so that young, aspiring teachers in the pipeline are told of this as they enroll? Absolutely.
So again, just this afternoon, Mr. Dorsett and I will be meeting with the education deans and directors they have a regularly standing meeting to continue that coordinated effort to make sure they know the rules, how they can do their own internal recruitment, because this is not just about the students that are already interested in the teacher pipeline. This is about getting students who may be on the fence about the teacher pipeline for one reason or another. And so so there is a coordinated effort with the education deans and directors, but there's certainly opportunity to do a much broader outreach beyond that. Yeah.
If I may interject, our new outreach person begins today.
So, all very timely.
Dr. Burnham has a question.
Yes, I'm curious. The financial support that fellows receive, what is it? Full tuition and fees?
Yes, correct.
For
Yep,
period of time that they're enrolled in the program.
Absolutely. Yep, full tuition and fees.
Vice Chair Agu?
Sure. 2 questions just to go back. Less questions, more comments. I think on the apprenticeship pathways, which are super important, particularly where those intersect with degree programs. Mm-hmm. We have to keep in mind as MHEC, you have a apprenticeship council, which is also making recommendations as we speak. I believe by the legislature, if I remember correctly. And then also we have our CTE council that's also making recommendations. And so as we think about this in our role, we need to make sure we're coordinated. The worst of all worlds is public bodies making conflicting recommendations on the same area. which I'm sure has happened before in Maryland, but we would like that not to happen in the future. I think secondly, on the teacher pathways and some of the problems you're talking about, which is how do you work in internships, practicums, things like that. We are not the first state to do this. California has grabbed this. Tennessee has grabbed this and has figured these things out. And it also, how will I say, it requires us to figure out how we make this work with the Carnegie Unit, which other states have figured out before us. But we can't let that stand in the way. And I really encourage a comparative approach to this, because we have states who have figured this out in terms of making, you have in parts of California where someone can get all their apprenticeship hours, get a degree, and do this with for between $5,000 to $6,000. So that is figured. So it's a solved problem that we need to figure out how we reverse engineer it in the state of Maryland. So I just wanted to name those because they're not rocket science that no one else has figured out.
Yep. Thank you, and noted. Took many notes on that. For what it's worth, I serve as the MHEC representative on the Apprenticeship Council, the 2030. Really good partnerships with Department of Labor. Certainly Senator Rosapep is a big advocate for this work. And so working closely, and in fact, again, all of this is very timely. Senator Rosapep, his sub-work group is meeting to discuss the financing. And so I believe Mr. Dorsett, our Director for Office of Student Financial Assistance, will be attending some of those meetings to help clarify statutory requirements for some of the new scholarships that are expanded to apprenticeship programs, and making necessary legislative changes to ensure that they are as expansive as possible. So,
let me see if I can turn it on. There it comes. So the dollars that are funding these programs that you're speaking about, are they all state dollars? Is there federal funding?
all of these are state dollars.
Okay, because if we have a government shutdown at the federal level, I was concerned about this.
No,
Thank you.
yeah, luckily state dollars, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, I believe they are all state dollars. Yeah. And I'll factually correct that if I'm wrong in a future meeting.
Let me just appreciate Commissioner Agu's comments on learning from other states. Dr. Dow and I had a wonderful meeting with our new interim superintendent, Dr. Wright, and she comes from a state that has also done really innovative work. You know, we want high quality teachers, diverse teachers, and we want them in large quantity. Maryland needs, 60,000 or so in the next 10 years. So scaling up those efforts is important. And, you know, we have to understand how teaching is changing, how technology is impacting what we do, how AI is impacting all this space. The reason we have very few teachers and we have this shortage because of the system that we have, right? So if you have to take 12 credits and then you have to do your internships 5 days, it's not going to work, right? How would it work? Only few people will be able to afford to succeed in this kind of format. So this is an opportunity for us to learn from other states, but also think beyond that as well. You know, there is how is information delivered? You know, it's that, you know, we spend certain hours in giving the formulas or standard things out, or that can be done in different ways. You know, students who get a 2-year nursing degree, RN degrees, they work in hospitals and then they do their BSN and they do very good job, right? So how can that be applied in the teaching area? If someone gets a 2-year degree in English or biology, can they start teaching and do some of these things while teaching? So if we have this rigid format, that's not going to work. So our conversations with the state, with the interim superintendents were very good, because sure, you know, MSDE is the licensing agency, but our deans and faculty on 4-year or 2-year colleges have significant expertise. So we have discussed bringing a joint group together and see how can we use expertise from this side also to change the model itself, right? So we are looking forward to working with the school system and looking at new ways of doing things. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. One last item that is of current work. Legislation from 2023, it's related to the blueprint, but is not explicitly a blueprint item, but is very specific to this teacher pipeline, is a new opportunity around internship stipends. So that has been an immediate task, again, under Mr. Dorsett's oversight to implement this year. For teachers, as you can probably imagine, there is a cost and a burden for students to engage with these required internship opportunities. And again, in particular, and slightly different than perhaps other fields, students are expected to be there full days. They're expected to go to specific locations that are maybe outside of their ability in terms of either their own access to transportation or access to public transportation. So this internship stipend is to help offset those costs. If you listen to legislation and the public comments from last session around this particular bill, there's a very compelling student talk about how she doesn't have access to a car, how long it takes her for public transportation to get to the school that she is supposed to be doing her hours at. She misses breakfast and lunch on her meal plan, and that comes out of her pocket, as well as as we all hear from everyone in the teaching profession, cost out of her own pocket for teaching supplies. And that is obviously not a unique situation that I think is experienced by many of our students engaging in a teacher preparation pipeline. So this internship stipend is intended to help offset that. There's kind of two stipends as part of this. One doesn't start for a couple more years, but this initial internship stipend is, again, supposed to help ensure that students are not deterred from the teaching pipeline because they do not have access to these resources.
And Dr. Dow, just want to precise, we administer this or we are providing technical assistance?
We administer it.
Got it, thank you.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And as I understand it, it will be a decentralized fund that we will give to the education deans and directors, and they will then be able to administer to students. We create the rules in terms of who would be eligible, but then authority to administer it would be with the education deans and directors, so that we are as much out of the way as possible to getting these funds to students in a timely manner. Okay, that's the update on Blueprint. So a lot of good work. Actually, no, I'm so sorry. I have two more things to tell you about Blueprint that I do not have slides for because I want to show you some websites. One is on just an update on college and career readiness. College and career readiness has been an ongoing topic for the past 8 months to a year. MSDE engaged with a third-party vendor to do an empirical study around essentially predictive validity metrics. What does it mean to be college and career ready, particularly at 10th grade? They worked with an organization called AIR, American Institutes for Research. They published that study in September. And between September and even up until last week, there has been ongoing discussion about the results of that study, what MSDE should do with it. AIB has been actively following this. So as of late, MSDE held a public meeting, a public comment period on November 9th, last Thursday in the evening from 5 until about 9 p.m. They invited a higher education panel, and I think this is an important symbolic statement. That panel opened up the public comment period. So Secretary Rye provided about 5 minutes worth of public comment around the current proposed standards for college and career readiness. We had a representative from the community colleges, and we had a representative from the University System of Maryland. And I'm happy to share that link with you so that you can hear those comments. After that, organizations like the Superintendent Association presented comments, and a number of other organizations as well as individuals provided public comments. So Just to share with you, this is a summary of the current proposed standards. The big kind of takeaway is that they are seriously considering incorporating high school GPA at the end of 10th grade, so their cumulative GPA for 9th and 10th grade, as an initial indicator of college readiness. On top of that, they are considering their success in completing Algebra 1, again, either in 9th or 10th grade, or earlier, depending on a student's student's trajectory, but the completion of Algebra 1 by the end of 10th grade. If a student does not have a 3.0 GPA, they then may take some high stakes testing to demonstrate that they have competencies. Similarly with Algebra 1, if they have not successfully passed Algebra 1, they would take the MCAP again to demonstrate proficiency and competency in mathematics. This all happens at the end of 10th grade. This does not as it has been explained to me, this does not necessarily mean that they could go ahead and enter into college right away. Instead, what this means is that students who are demonstrated to be college and career ready by the end of 10th grade per these metrics would be given universal opportunity to enter into dual enrollment, take AP classes, go into a CTE program, enroll or participate in a youth or registered apprenticeship. So, and the reason for that is there has been demonstrated inequities around students who participate in dual enrollment under previous structures. So this now becomes a statewide standard that says, if you can meet these metrics, you get to do a dual enrollment, you get to do AP, you get to do the like. And school systems are then bound to providing those opportunities to students post 10th grade. So that's benefit one. If you are not deemed college and career ready by the end of 10th grade, what is supposed to happen is that students in 11th and 12th grade are given the services and resources to be college and career ready by the time they graduate. And that they are provided supports, they are provided resources, so that they can leave high school ready to enter into a career, college, or both. So that is the whole essence of 10th grade CCR standards and what this looks like.
Question. Go ahead, Commissioner Howe, go ahead. Go ahead.
And this is how it's been explained to me, and as I understand it, and I think as many people understand it, but
This is on now. So isn't one of the difficulties with the completion at the career and whatever college readiness program that some then colleges and universities will not accept the students because there's a problem
Disconnect.
with the recognition that the courses that they have taken are adequate?
Absolutely. So that is where rubber hits the road, and that is where we are still working through those nuances to make sure it is clear that whatever standard the Maryland State Board of Education adopts, students are not being told, okay, you're a college and career ready at the end of 10th grade. They then go to particularly enroll at one of our selective public institutions, meaning that they have an admissions criteria, and then they're told, no, you're not college ready. You're not ready for this. So we've said that loud and clear in a number of meetings. That is a very important point in terms of equity, communication. So I think the people who need to hear that have heard that, but that is something that we, the agency, have been very clear that we need to make sure we are aligned and consistent on that front.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
Dr. Dow, I realize this is, you're not necessarily the expert on this. This is more of an MSD thing. But to the extent you know, for the students who complete 10th grade who don't have a 3.0, which I would venture to say is most students across the state, who pays for and provides the extra resources that you described for 11th and 12th graders?
So as I understand it, and this is, I preface this, I am not the expert, but as I understand it, that is part of the additional funding that LEAs will be receiving, and that they will have to demonstrate how they use those funds to provide those resources. So it again, back to the origination of the Kirwan Commission and the recommendations from that, LEAs said loud and clear, listen, we don't have necessarily the resources to support all of our students. And so these new funding formulas are intended to provide funding to have those resources available. That is how I understand. So just as MHEC had to submit an implementation plan, all of the LEAs had to submit an implementation plan. Implementation plans are supposed to be revised in March. MSDE and AIB have provided feedback on the LEA, and they're all public, so you could go and look at your own county's They are supposed to articulate how they are going to use funding, how they're going to do these post-CCR pathways, what kind of services they're going to provide, how they're going to work with families and students and the like.
So just to add to that, as agency, we are supporting AIR's recommendations. Some of the main objectives are this. If you're college ready, you're college ready in the state of Maryland. What we can't accept that you're college ready for this college, but you're not college ready for another college, right? It's statewide standards, number one. Number two, earlier today we talked about financial barriers, right? How to make college accessible. And this is about how to make curriculum accessible to large number of students, not put lot of barriers. So typically what used to happen is, at least at some of our institutions, that students will be given a high-stake test, and they won't know the consequences of that test. You go for admission, and then you are sent to assessment center, you take a certain test, you're not prepared for it, you're not thinking about it, and suddenly you are in what is called developmental classes. And those developmental classes, terrible success rates. And it is true now that we know from our own data in the state of Maryland that several of those students didn't need to take those developmental classes. So I'm so glad that we have Commissioner Dukes here. She provided leadership about 5 years ago at the state level, and we were able to change that. And when we went to the GPA placement, not 4 years of work in several different courses, assessments done by several different teachers, right? What we saw in the data, at least some of the data that I know, that more students are able to access college level courses, especially our Latino students and our Black students. And more of them are passing college level math and English courses within first year. In many cases, this increase is significant, it's up to 100%. So all these years, we were putting these barriers, and we have to think differently about it. Now, what I like in these recommendations that sure, by grade 10, you have to do Algebra 1, which is okay. But typically, mathematics developed, hundreds of years, arithmetic, then abstraction, algebra, and then, calculus and all that. That's the way it worked. But today we know enough that calculus is not the only thing. We are preparing students for data science, statistics, and other things. You may know calculus, but you may not be able to use data, right? So we have to think alternate pathways. So a lot of these algebra-based pathways and all that often were, they ended up stopping a lot of students from getting post-secondary credentials. So I'm very hopeful about these things, and thanks to Commissioner Dukes and others, Maryland last 5 years is already on that path, and we'll continue to support these activities. And Blueprint, significant funding, state funding for LEAs, knowing early in grade 10 which students need support. And in Maryland, the students have to take math and English for all 4 years. So you have already funding in budgets to teach for all 4 years, and additional funding to some of our students who need some little extra help. And this way, more and more students will be college ready. But the equity gap that we see in our data is caused by some of these systems that we have put in place, and it's time to really tear them down. Thank you.
I think Commissioner Serrano has a question.
Yeah, actually on the issue of funding, I guess, right, can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
great. So I guess a couple questions. So one is, do we have somebody going to the Mako event or Mako conference that's happening on the 8th, I think, of December? And I guess it ties into my second question, is like the conference is titled like the Eye of the Storm, the idea of like turbulence and budget cuts and, you know, deficits and so forth. So to what extent are we building in some resilience in what we're trying to do in terms of like the idea of budget shortfalls? Because it sounds like it will happen next year, and to have kind of a great plan of scholarships and what we want, but then if we're talking a lot about LEAs and these LEAs are facing a lot of budget shortfalls, what is our kind of plan B, plan C, and so forth?
I am not able to speak on that with any.
I think, that's something, undetermined at this point. But I think knowing our priorities and how we are going about it is important. Let me also tell you that if you look at national resources or funding that were going towards developmental education, or is still largely going towards developmental education, it's not in millions, it's in billions of dollars. And that's unneeded, mostly unneeded work. Some students need some extra work, that's certainly fine. So, there is, the cost of higher education is going up. Some of these things are part of it. And we have to look at this infrastructure and change it. I think Blueprint by law has certain funding, so we are very hopeful that this model will be successful and resources will be there.
I would also add that the Secretary has been in close touch with the state's Department of Budget and Management, with Helene Grady, the Secretary. She and Dr. Rai are in close touch, and she's outstanding. So I think the state has a good plan, and I'm confident that Secretary Grady has a plan B, C, D, and E.
One, again, I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment, but Dr. could you speak to, so you usually when we talk about CCR, college and career standards, we end up talking about college readiness. We generally hear very little about career readiness.
That's right.
And so I'm curious to the extent, where has that figured in? And I will say, I think from what I hear, it makes sense about kind of what the stage gates we're trying to create and remove for students to get access to this broader curricula. The one concern I have is that some of those things are I would argue are required to be career ready. Mm-hmm. You don't read a book about how to do well in a meeting. You're in a meeting and you say the wrong thing once, and someone tells you not to say that thing again, and then you do better the next time. So I am slightly concerned about, are we putting up barriers for those things that make students career ready versus the things that make them college ready. So I'm curious kind of what is the career readiness conversation look like in those rooms? And then secondly, that second question in terms of, are we erecting barriers to keep students from some of those things that might make them career ready?
Absolutely. So it is on, at least from the meetings that I attend in collaboration with AIB, it is on their radar. I do not know how that is getting addressed with specificity. It is challenging for the representative for the Maryland Higher Education Commission to speak on career readiness, but know that there have been opportunities when appropriate to speak up and say, let's recognize that these are academic metrics that are designed for academic outcomes. And you're absolutely right that we're missing a piece to this definition, to this concept of college and career readiness and what that looks like. I will share with you, I was on a meeting yesterday with a group of leaders around the state that deal with students with disabilities, and particularly students with significant disabilities. Mm-hmm. And they had shared concerns that, again, particularly with students with intellectual disabilities, career opportunities in high school are significant for these students. To be able to go to a job, learn how to show up on time, learn how to follow instructions, learn a skill within that context. And so we back that out and we say, okay, at the end of 10th grade, it is unlikely that students with these significant disabilities will necessarily meet these academic metrics of college and career readiness. Now we're going to tell them, well, then we're going to give you services and you can't go and do those CTE programs or career opportunities that will lead to success post-high school graduation. So that's just one example of a subset of population that may have an unintended consequence to having an academic standard around college and career readiness and not thinking about other standards that could demonstrate a student's potential for success, whatever they want to do in whatever capacity.
First of all, thank you for that. I think I might be out of my skis here, but I think it is important for MHAC and the broader Maryland higher education community to assert themselves in the labor discussion, because very simply, just for two reasons. One, most businesses that show up here who need workers, where do they stop off first? They go to their local county community college, and they say, I need these workers at this place. Similarly, the largest giver of credentials in the state of Maryland is UMGC, by far. And so that's not for you. You know this, but I think it's important for us to not shy away from that discussion, because bluntly, we are the largest pipe in that pipeline of workers for any business who's trying to do business here.
Wait 1 second. So recently I read that I believe it's Baltimore County and Montgomery County got an enormous infusion of money for training of, I think it's tractor trailer driver people, who can be encouraged to come, get trained, get certified, and have jobs. How does that fit into this program?
Absolutely. So those are opportunities that will likely fall within a CTE program, a college career technical education opportunity that have already been established. They exist in many of the high schools, but they don't exist in all of the high schools, and they don't exist with the breadth or variety that maybe every student should have an opportunity towards. So that then again speaks to this issue of transferability, making sure that our colleges recognize those certifications and those opportunities to say, while they may not be traditional college credit, they demonstrate that a student has a skill set above a high school diploma that they can do things. And so the opportunities exist. Blueprint is intended to expand those opportunities and ensure that there are a variety of those. It's not just you get an auto mechanic at one high school within that school district. You get an auto mechanic, you get a cybersecurity, you get a health field, so on and so forth.
Commissioner Dukes.
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, good afternoon and thank you. I do believe, in response to the commissioner's question or comment with regard to the resources that have come into Maryland, that there are a number of our community colleges who've received those from the Department of Transportation to work specifically with, CDL licensing. The other thing that I might suggest is that Dr. Dow mentioned earlier a panel that talked about and were represented before the Blueprint Commission with regard to college and career readiness and some other matters that are certainly contained within that document. It might be helpful to ask a panel of community college presidents to come before the commission so that they can really talk about what happens relative to career foci, both in our public schools and the kind of relationships that exist from career and technical education into the community colleges for which students get college credit, and then the stackable credentials as they continue to move on that can move them to an associate degree. But it is also really determining and preparing them for the kinds of careers that we're talking about. I did appreciate Commissioner Serrano's comment about, college and career readiness. And that is the work that's being done, not just in our community colleges, but in our four-year institutions as well. We talk a lot about workforce and workforce development and what does it mean in order to provide a student with the kinds of skills and capabilities that allow them to move in a variety of directions dependent upon what their interests, desires, dreams, and aspirations are. So it might be helpful to hear from some presidents or others in their institutions who are really on the ground with this work, and it's been groundbreaking across the state of Maryland.
Thank you. Any other questions?
One quick
Yes.
question. Thank you, Dr. Dow, for the information. I'm wondering, did the AIR report deal with career readiness specifically? Or
Yeah.
did they have outcomes from the report that they wanted to share with everyone?
It's a good question. My assessment is it is not as robust as I think this conversation is indicating it should be. It's not that they didn't address it, it's not as robust. And that would be my take on it.
Thanks. Good question. Thanks, Dr. Dow. Any other questions before Dr. Dow moves on?
I have one more update.
Of course.
On this issue of Blueprint. Sorry, I said I had two. I stuck to two. The only other update is we did recently receive a request from AIB to provide some clarifying comments and remarks on our MHEC implementation plan. So Secretary Rye and I will work together. Many of the follow-up questions are about these collaborations and how we are working with various stakeholders and key leaders to move the ball forward on these initiatives. So just know that that has been a request and that we will respond accordingly to AIB. The last thing I'll say is, Commissioner Agu, if I can just respond, what I hear you saying is that you are encouraging us, you're encouraging agency representatives when appropriate to push on this issue of career readiness and advocate for that as much as possible.
I mean, I'm happy to show up and do it myself, but but I think just the reality is we are a huge part of that pipeline.
Okay.
And so we should have no hesitancy about speaking up in that part of the conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Burnham?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to point out that this presentation has been very helpful. I've learned a lot, and I'd like a copy of it if so.
That's a great idea. Dr. Dow, could you circulate it to the commission, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
This one and certainly the next one as well.
Wonderful.
So just to kind of sum this up, MHEC has certain responsibilities on blueprint implementation. Purpose of this presentation is to kind of tell you where we are with it. And they are basically in career college and career readiness area where we intersect quite heavily, teacher preparation, early childhood. And we are on track, but I also want to say that I'm very, very thankful to staff in our agency, because this has added significant work, and they're already doing a lot of other things. So we are trying to manage going forward, how do we continue to do this work? So thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to our last agenda item, which I think is also a presentation from Dr. Dow, an overview of the student transfer process in Maryland.
Thank you. Slideshow, current slide. Okay. So transfer is another hot topic for our agency. And so I want to give you a bit of an overview and again, provide an update of where we are in terms of implementing some of these changes and next steps. Just to give you some data and context, this demonstrates the number of transfer students. This is for the 2020 to 2021 timeframe. So it's a couple years old. This will get updated actually in the next couple of weeks through one of our transfer dashboards. But it demonstrates we have a lot of transfer students, and this is limited. This is just visibility of a student that was at one point at a community college, and now we see them at some point at a public four-year institution. Montgomery is one of our largest exporter of transfer students. Next is CCBC, and then Howard and Anne Arundel, which makes sense. They are some of our larger community colleges. What is also of note with these data is College Park does take on a lot of transfer students. They are the largest. Anecdotally, you may hear complaints that College Park is not transfer friendly. They accept transfer students. We see transfer students there, and that is a desirable place. And then Towson, UMGC, and UMBC are the next three public institutions that take on a good number of transfer students. So transfer is alive and well in Maryland, and just gives you a bit of scope. Secretary Rye and I had a wonderful opportunity to convene with U.S. Department of Education on Thursday of last week. They convened a number of states through a larger initiative under the Secretary's Raising the Bar title. And so this convening was specific to transfer. What was really fascinating, and I think one of the best takeaways of this convening, is they gave Maryland all the state representatives data specific to our state using their own analyses and tools. So what I'd like to highlight is one of those handouts that they gave us, and hopefully you can read this. I know, sorry.
It's actually very hard to read.
I am so
Would it
sorry.
be possible for us to get some handouts, Ms. Ng?
Yes,
Could you
we will.
make some copies for us, even right now as we're looking at it, but if you could talk us through it.
Absolutely. What the U.S. Department of Ed did, and this is through their new Office of Chief Economists, so that I expect lots more analyses to come through. They looked at dyads of community college and public 4 years, and took cohorts of students and followed them along. What is fascinating here is Warwick and Salisbury rise to the top as a successful partnership. Of 385 students, 10% of those students successfully completed at Salisbury afterwards. 39 students may not seem like a lot, but 10% is pretty significant. You can then see Montgomery College with College Park, Hartford Community College and Towson, CCBC with Towson, and downwards. What I'd like to when I saw these data, I was sitting at a table with 3 other states. Those states did not have double-digit comparisons. They had single digits. And they all looked at me and said, "What are you doing in Maryland that Warwick and Salisbury are doing so well?" And I was like, well, I'll have to find out. I don't know specifically what is going on with Warwick and Salisbury. So again, we just received this information on Thursday. I'd like to be able to replicate this. This is from 2014 as well. So this is pretty old data because it's following students over an 8-year period. But we can replicate this with some of our own internal MHEC data. And so I'm working with our research staff to see what we can do to get updated versions of this or use this analysis in a way that can help us inform successful partnerships between a community college and a 4-year institution.
Actually, Commissioner Thompson, go ahead.
Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you very much. Quick question regarding the definition of what we mean by transfer.
Right.
Are we speaking of those students who actually complete the AA degree and then go on? Or are we speaking of a student that may have, say, had a semester and then decided to transfer?
That is a good question. I would need to look at the footnotes on for this particular one. What is of note is it is that final column is students that did complete a bachelor's degree. So even if it is just scooping up the one semester student, it is students completing a bachelor's degree. Yeah, but I can find out, and I'm happy to share the packet of information with the commissioners as
It may
well.
be a combination of both, I don't know.
Right, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Do you have any data on how many community college students want to pursue a 4-year degree?
Oh, that is a good question. I don't think we know intent. Yeah.
But I mean, there's some students who want an associate's degree to help them with their job. I'm looking at Mr. Phillips, our Association of Community Colleges representative. But from someone who's coming into this job, this volunteer job, relatively new, the rap on Maryland, I think, has been that the transfer process is unnecessarily difficult. And so I understand you can't really get into a student's mind and gauge intent, but I think it would be helpful to know how many students are diverted from transferring because it's just too difficult. They can't jump through all the hoops.
Right.
Because that's something we can help fix.
Absolutely.
If there's some students, for whatever reason, want their 2-year degree to go do a job that requires it, that's great, and they should, of course, continue to do that. But to the extent that the articulation agreements need to be reformed or MHEC needs to, I don't know much about this, but I just know that there is a reputation that it is hard to transfer in this state. And I think that we as a commission, or at least I personally as a commissioner, would like to help fix that. So it'd be very interested in your insight about how to make that happen.
Absolutely. And I have slides on that, on what we're doing to make it better.
So how many students are interested in a bachelor's degree who start at community college? That number is very, very high. I mean, I have to be careful what I quote, but if my memory serves me right, it's in high 80%. So that's, and the other thing is that there are some other data that we saw at Department of Education, and Maryland was on top everywhere, demographics and everything else. But having said that, transfer is an interesting thing, right? You are able to transfer, which is good, but the process is still, not easy. So there is opportunity for improvement. Then the other thing is credit loss. You transferred, did you transfer at a junior standing, exactly same as native students, or you have to take more coursework? So there is opportunity for improvement, and I think that in my presentation at this national conference, I talked about Transfer with Success Act that our General Assembly passed, and the audience said, wow, right? So I think, that's a good thing that happened in Maryland, and it's our opportunity that how to implement that act. So the more work needs to be done, but we are in a good space, and it's all because of the partnerships that are there at the institutional level. You see Warwick and Salisbury. You see Montgomery College and UMD. So the faculty to faculty. So a lot of these things have not happened because of a system, right? But we have to create a system so that, different places are not having different experiences. Students from Salisbury able to transfer to University of Maryland, right? There are a lot of opportunities for good work, and we are convening faculty groups and other things. It's still, I'll say, challenging work. It's not very easy.
So I believe it was either Lumina Foundation or Gates Foundation did a study on exactly this question a long time ago, and the numbers it was in the 80s in terms of students who wanted to transfer, and I believe the figure was probably below 20% in terms of who actually did. And I expect, and that was national data, but I expect, frankly, Maryland is no different. I think on the process point, and I think about my prior days in the private sector, you have many firms who, because the process is so complicated, who literally market and sell technologies and solutions to help colleges with that process. And I actually would argue there's a policy part here, which is articulation and credits. There's also just a burden, just bureaucratic burden. And as I think about, this may be a place to engage our new chief performance officer, as well as our new digital experience team in the Department of IT under Secretary Savage, because there's also just a customer experience challenge, which is just too many websites, too many offices, so on and so forth. I wanted to make sure I understood this slide. That was my question to you, which is, so basically they have found these pairs of a lot of students from this community college transfer this 4-year, and basically X amount of students transfer, and that percentage at the end is the ones who actually make it to a bachelor's degree.
Right.
I wanted to make sure I understood that flow.
Yep.
So we're at 10%, which is at the right side of the curve, which on one side makes you feel good. On the other side, 10% is not that high a number. So I also, and so definitely I think about kind of how, that points to a broader student success challenge that we have at across the, I just want to make sure I understood that flow.
Yep. Correct. Yes. Yeah. The alternative is 90% of those students did not finish the bachelor's degree. They did not finish the bachelor's degree at Salisbury. So it may
That's
mean.
not, okay, that's not captured here. Okay,
Yeah,
got
that
it.
is
That's
not
fair.
captured.
That's
It
fair.
is that they finished, it's 10% that finished at Salisbury.
Got it. Okay, that's a fair point.
Which is why we can do a slightly different and perhaps more robust analysis with our information. What I wanted to highlight here is that we do have successful partnerships. And again, this is from 2014 cohort. A lot has happened in the past 10 years that will have hopefully improved these numbers. And again, I sat at a table with 3 other states, and their charts all were single digits. So single
Thank you.
percentages.
Thank you.
And I think building on that, the data point, I don't know if you can see me, that would be helpful if we have, and if it's not easy, that's of course fine, but of students who started at community college and went on to earn their BA, at what institutions were they earning their BA? Because I think that will help uncover perhaps where that transfer process is working more seamlessly to help identify what the other institutions can build backwards from.
Sorry, can I ask one unrelated question, or maybe it is related, and it goes to the enrollment question that you addressed in your remarks. When you saw the increase in enrollment, particularly for community colleges, does that also include non-credit enrollment, meaning certifications, things like that?
So that was purely a credit enrollment.
Okay. My expectation is if you were to put in non-credit enrollment, that number would even, this curve would even be higher.
Yeah.
That's my instinct. Okay, got it. Thank you.
What I noticed in the chart was that the partnerships, such as Warwick and Salisbury, or Hartford and Towson, seem to work, or Montgomery College and UMCP, where they are geographically close to each other, presumably because the professors overlap and they can agree upon what courses count at the 2-year level to apply. I think we have a real opportunity with the University of Maryland Global Campus, which Vice Chair Agu mentioned earlier. In, now that we've been through the pandemic and everybody understands you can actually learn online, UMGC awards a lot of degrees. I mean, it's in competition nationally with some of these for-profits. And I really think as a state, we should be leveraging that and leveraging the online learning and figuring out how to do that. And I don't know if hopefully there is a role for MHEC to play there. But I think it's great to have the partnerships where the professors are near each other geographically, but in this 21st century, we should also be focusing on virtual learning as well.
Absolutely.
Excellent idea. And there are programs at UMGC that are very unique. So if you look at cybersecurity program, it's a great program. And it's unique in the sense that that's the only program. It's unique in the sense that it's the only program that aligns with what we called applied studies cybersecurity program. That's more hands-on networking and other things at our community colleges. And if you look at the data, just from Montgomery College, in the last 4 or 5 years, I think 400 or so students got access. Second, I think Prince George's Community College, several hundred. So that's a very, very good partnership. The other thing is, I'll say about Montgomery and University of Maryland. University of Maryland has put full-time advisors on Montgomery College campuses to help students transition. And they are there full-time on Montgomery College campuses. So University of Maryland and USM system, they have invested resources. And that's very unique nationally. It doesn't happen in other states. So we really appreciate those partnerships.
All right, if you can please move along, thank you.
Yes.
I think Commissioner Serrano has a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just
Did
one
you,
quick
Ray?
question. I did. Sorry. Just a question on financial aid, because I think, like, so my understanding on the FAFSA form doesn't have like family debt. It's not listed on there. So I'm assuming that, like, if you have students that are transfer students, that would be kind of in this kind of a weird situation where they're, you know, they're independent, but they kind of, and they have dependents themselves. Like, to what extent do we know that, like, of the schools that have a higher, I guess, I mean, we mentioned Salisbury, but like, a higher transition from transfer students to a four-year, what is the role of the financial aid departments there? Because I think I think we talk a lot about the transfer credits themselves and the classes, but I think there's also a component of the cost. I mean, I think some students are coming in at a certain, you know, maybe they have kids, maybe they have a different life circumstances, that it's not just simply the 18, you know, 19-year-old kid wanting to go into a four-year institution. So what is, can you speak a little bit about on the kind of the success stories of where you have a higher yield from a transfer to a four-year institution, where you are seeing kind of the role of financial aid offices coming on board?
So I think we'll need to follow up with you on that. The one thing that I can share is we do have a statewide scholarship for transfer students. It's $1,000 or $2,000 depending on the field of study. So that is an opportunity, but I see Secretary Rye ready, so I will turn it over to him.
So you raise really an excellent question. Community colleges, certainly the tuition is significantly lower. So one of the challenges when students transfer, that tuition, depending on where you transfer, it can go up from 200% to maybe 600-700%, and that's one of the major challenge. Second, often scholarships available, and for good reasons, they are at the freshman level more than at the transfer level. Then the other thing is that the kind of support that's available for a working parent and somebody who's working full-time, having families at community college, that kind of flexibility, you lose some of that in the transfer. Good news is that our universities are looking at transfer scholarships in a very creative way. I give you an example of Clark School of Engineering at University of Maryland. They raised funds from Clark Foundation, especially for transfer scholarships. I don't have the exact number, but it's it's in millions of dollars. And many students who transfer from community college to Clark School of Engineering at University of Maryland get significant financial support to a point that some of them are probably paying very little once they transfer. They're very good models, but that is an issue. That's again part of transfer challenge.
Any other questions before Dr. Dow moves on? Dr. Dow, we have received the hard copy of the presentation. Thank you, Ms. Ng. And the slides look great. As you proceed through your presentation, if you could, for those of us who are new to this process, really make clear what, if any, MHEC's role is here.
Absolutely.
That would be helpful.
Sure. So that is right where that's exactly where we are going. So let me catch you up to speed on some recent policy changes that have happened in the past 2 years. In 2021, a pretty significant, simple, but very significant bill was passed called the Transfer with Success Act. This bill did two things. It required public institutions to jointly review credits or courses that are denied when a student transfers from one public institution to another. And it created a new reporting requirement in which MHEC will learn when those denials happen. Before this legislation, a student starts off at a community college and they go to transfer to a four-year institution with or without an associate's degree. And they say, hey, look at my transcript. Can my courses transfer? And the four-year institution may say, yes, some of your courses can transfer, but some of your courses can't. And you're going to have to retake something or take something slightly different because it's not exactly what we want. And the sending institution would never be the wiser. There was no explicit communication for the sending institution, particularly the community colleges, to know that they have designed a course that is not transferring or is not well aligned for a student to be successful at a four-year institution. So this, in many ways, attempts to resolve that by creating a communication loop between sending and receiving institutions when courses are denied for transfer. And then, of course, the reporting requirement. Recent work, we've been working on this and we'll continue to work on this. This is an ongoing initiative. We convened stakeholders to inform regulatory changes. As an agency, we could have said, okay, follow the legislation, talk to each other, and we move on. We took the opportunity to say we need to do some major reform on transfer. We looked at our regulations. They hadn't been revised in decades. So this was our opportunity to kind of do an overhaul. So we met with appropriate leadership for over a year to walk through significant regulatory changes.
Dr. Dow, one
yes.
quick just process question.
Mhm.
The regs around transfer, do those sit with for MHEC to do, for the individual systems to do? Who actually has the regulatory ball here?
We do.
Okay, that's what I thought. Just wanted to ask.
Yeah. Late spring into the summer, regulations were reviewed and went through the AAL process, and ultimately went into effect September 2022. So really a full revision. As part of that, we issued a pretty lengthy guidance document in October to help campuses implement all of these changes, which we will go over in just a minute. In January, we received implementation plans. Because this is such a big overhaul, we asked campuses, what are your priorities? What are you going to be focusing on? Some of this is requiring technological infrastructure changes in terms of tracking students, bringing them in, looking at their credits, being able to have this communication channel with the sending institution. Some campuses said, listen, we're only going to focus on our primary partnerships. We're only going to focus on the community colleges or the four-year institutions that we work with closely. Some colleges said, we're only going to look at our 5 biggest majors that receive transfer students and really clean up and make sure we have appropriate advising and our faculty are talking to one another. So those implementation plans were very informative to see how campuses were going to implement all of these changes. Currently, we are working on course equivalency guidance, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. And we have engaged very directly with our Faculty Advisory Council to provide insight and input on that guidance document. And working on this data collection. This data collection has proved to be a bit more challenging than what we would expect. We are working through nuances. Is it a student level collection? Is it a course? Do we care about the courses being denied? Do we care about the students? Ultimately, I think we've landed we care about both. And so we've got to design a file layout that captures that so that not only can we hold institutions accountable for when they deny credit, but we can also track students and their success as they navigate our public higher education systems. Okay, so that's just kind of an update of where we are. Let me give you a background on what all of these changes have done. As part of this work, we've established statewide transfer principles. These are concepts, philosophical statements around transfer that we really need to set the tone. Maximizing the transfer of courses and credits, distinguishing between credits and courses, there's an important distinction there. The difference between transferability and applicability. So we have, there may be times when a campus says, we're going to accept your courses and credits for transfer, but it's not going to apply to your major of study. This is particularly important when students may change majors and do drastic changes of fields of study. They go from engineering into English or history. And so that course may transfer, but it may not apply to degree requirements. So teasing apart this idea of transferability from applicability is kind of a conceptual important distinction that we needed to put out there. And the people who do this work know that distinction, but it's important that we recognize it through this work. Transparency for students. Just to the comments earlier, students need to know how to navigate this. They need to know what their options are. It needs to be very clear, if I start at this school in this program, what are my options and what does that look like and how can I ask questions? Who do I need to talk to? So transparency in the process and equality, that we are not holding our transfer students to a different standard from non-transfer students. We have heard stories that transfer students are held to a arguably higher standard because there are assumptions about the coursework that they had received from a sending institution. So we have worked to say, listen, higher education in Maryland is higher education in Maryland. Our community colleges are accredited by middle states. They have qualified faculty. They know what they're doing. So if they've completed an intro to statistics course at a community college, that should transfer. No questions asked.
To that point, has there ever been thought given to having a statewide universal course catalog? There has.
So common course numbering has been discussed. This is my, Emily's perspective, when this topic comes up, there is not a big appetite for it in Maryland. Florida has adopted it. And again, at this transfer convening in November, I had some conversations with Massachusetts on how they have handled this, and they've actually adopted a internal common course numbering without it being an external to help with the bureaucratic. So to students, they don't know it exists, but it does exist. So that's all to say there's been discussions. I don't think that there's an appetite for it right now. There are a lot of challenges around adopting common course numbering and common catalogs. So I know Secretary Rai, you know. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not done with this topic, but I'm done asking questions about it today. Yes, Commissioner Williams.
Dr. Dow, thanks for the presentation. I know there's a lot more to go through.
Yeah.
But in terms of principles, perhaps it's discussed later, but wouldn't measurement be part of a principle here? I don't see it there specifically, but measurement of success. How do we define success? Is it transfer among institutions to have a bachelor's degree at year 4 from the moment a student enters a community college 4 years prior, or year 5 or 6 or whatever that may be? But it seems like measurement is a key principle, and behind measurement is the transfer of data among institutions that can speak to each other in a consumable, at business speed way. And so I imagine that there's probably a number of different data systems among institutions that may be part of a challenge around measurement of success. So I wonder if you will address that, and then ultimately what we're defining success as, if that's graduation at a point in time from a 4-year institution, and how we're doing that globally. The last thing I would just ask you to think about as you go through it, I know that the Department of Education provided those dyads, geographic dyads, the 8 of them, but I think there's probably a whole nexus of different transfers from one community college to one public in a different geographic area of the state, from a 4-year public to a 4-year private, from a community college to a private, and so forth. So as we go through this effort, is MHEC's intent to map, like I could see like a really comprehensive map of where the transfers are occurring, and that would lead to broader lessons around what are the barriers for transfer? Is it financial aid? Is it technical? Is it the lack of a universal course catalog and so forth? So hopefully, you'll address those things, but my concern is really around measurement and how data flows to get to a definition of success.
It's a great point and is not explicitly addressed in the documents and materials that we have shared, but it is something that we can absolutely incorporate.
Yeah, so some of the things that are in conversation here and other places, after transfer, what is the completion rate? In how many years? How many courses were transferred? What was the GPA at the time of transfer and at the time of completion? Some of the data tells me that students who transfer, they succeed at least at the same rate as native students, and that there's a lot of truth to that. How much financial aid was received, what kind of support was given to working parents and others. So there are a whole list of things that we would like to bring in. And the other thing is sharing data. One is technological things, right? But then there are legal issues, privacy and others. I remember we were fortunate to win a Gates grant to study transfer some community colleges with UMBC. That just the legal document that we had to sign was this. So I'm not saying anything about our lawyers, but the data privacy is a serious issue. And, we have to look at policy solutions there and technological solutions, both. They're all part of the solution, actually.
Just one further point, as we go through this effort, student indebtedness, I think, would be a very important data point for students who transfer and go to a public or another institution, and that smoothing of financial support between one setting to another, and a measurement of indebtedness of transfer students compared to students who may have been at an institution for 4 years, to ensure that we're reducing barriers for transfer students.
One other just on the piece of data that I think is happening, to talk to it a little bit, is the intended program of study. And the only reason that I mention it is as we think about trying to link this with the workforce. So if we were to look at this data and see, oh, shoot, we have a lot of students who want to transfer in cybersecurity and are not able to, that's actually a challenge. That's an economic development challenge that we should seek to solve. Right now, we don't have quite that visibility. The institutions know.
Right.
So how do we kind of lift that up to the state level so that we can have a kind of a broader enterprise view? But I would just name that as a piece of data I think would be really helpful.
Thank you. Yep. Okay. Collaboration. Last one on there is embracing that campuses need to talk to one another, faculty need to talk, provosts need to talk to one, right? We've got to have conversations to make this work. This is in the best interest of the student and what makes sense for the student. Okay. So what we did in these new regulatory changes is we created a 5-step process. In your slide deck, you will have detailed slides on each of the 5. I'm just going to go through them very quickly on that first slide. So the first step in this process, this new process about how students can transfer their courses and credits, is a transfer evaluation report. This has to start with the student. We heard from campuses that before we implemented these regulations, sometimes a campus would just get a transcript. They'd have to talk to the admissions office. Is this a student that's trying to transfer? What should I do with it? And it would fumble around the campus until it made it to the right person to make the evaluation. This now says campuses need to have an explicit start point for students to say, I want my transcripts evaluated, and I want these courses evaluated for the purposes of transfer. We've also said in this process, this evaluation is separate and apart from the admissions process. So a student could get their courses evaluated separate and apart from whether or not they are going to be admitted to the school. So transfer evaluation is step 1. The second step is evaluation of course or credit. So in this process, a transfer coordinator is supposed to be looking at each individual course that is intended for transfer and thinking through the distinction of transferability versus applicability and teasing those two things apart. So in this process, we are only considering transferability. Applicability is more like a degree audit. How do these courses apply to the program of study? That is a secondary consideration, separate and apart from this review. So really, this is only about whether or not the course transfers. Well, what does that mean to transfer? So we had to create rules around what it meant that something could or could not transfer. First and foremost, is there an articulation agreement? That's an easy one. Is this course included in an articulation agreement for a particular program of study? Is it a gen ed? Gen ed transfer, no questions asked. That's across the board. That's not a new thing. That existed for years beforehand, and we've maintained that. If you've taken a course for the purposes of meeting general education requirements, then that gets transferred, no questions asked. So the new add that we did is this idea of course equivalency. If a course is deemed equivalent, if a sending course is deemed equivalent to something that is offered at the receiving institution, then it should transfer. Well, what's equivalent? So in that work group, we came up with a metric that 70% of the learning objectives must be the same between the sending course and the receiving course. And if an institution says, listen, 70% of there's overlap in these two courses, then it's got to transfer. And we've got to do that. So that is where this new rule, and that's a new rule, and there's some controversy over it, this 70% rule around course equivalency. In my conversations with other states, this is kind of novel. No other state has made this standard. Instead, they've gone with common course numbering. They've gone with other models to demonstrate that courses are same enough for the purposes of transferring.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. I actually do think this is novel. So you're basically saying what they can't use to evaluate is, did they read the same book?
Yeah, exactly.
It is, were they intended to learn the same things that they would have learned in our course, no matter how they learned it?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So
See, often, the course articulations, it became a practice of editing. You found one little thing that's not common, therefore is not. But we know from academics that every course has its soul, right? Their main ideas, right? As long as you could get to the main ideas, it's not about covering the material. You're uncovering some things, right? So it's stepping away from that kind of editing just to say, hey, this thing is not covered in your course, therefore it can't transfer, right? That's not a good approach.
Right, and you said the law uses the word equivalent, and the work group came up with the 70% rule via regulation. But the statute says equivalent, is that right?
The statute says transferability. It
doesn't.
Nope, okay. But it doesn't say equivalent.
Okay.
All right. I'm not sure if this is on, but in any event, the statute is actually fairly bare bones, so much of this was done through regulatory definitions. Emily or Dr. Dow or I could send you a link to those regulations. There's a very comprehensive set of definitions for all of these things.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the work group was made up of representatives from 4-year colleges, 2-year colleges, MEC, the usual
Absolutely.
broad group of perspectives.
And we floated all of these changes with registrars, with faculty, senior leadership, transfer coordinators, so that everybody kind of saw this before they went into effect and provided input, important input. Okay, so step number, so let me just clarify. So for example, the institutions cannot say textbook, cannot say modality. Oh, well, this was an online course, it doesn't transfer. Cannot say, well, it was a summer course or a short intensive course. Those are not reasons to say a course is not transferable. It really is coming down to course content and learning objectives. Okay. The third step is a transfer evaluation report, an actual document that says, here are the courses you sought to transfer, and here are the courses that we are going to take. Here's their equivalency, or if there's no equivalency, then we're not taking it. This transfer evaluation report goes both to the student as well as the sending institution, and this then does that feedback loop as the legislation requires. Then the fourth step is a review of the denial. The sending institution has an opportunity to do an analysis and say, hey, no, we think that these courses are the same. We've done our own analysis. Our faculty have talked to one another. We do think that this is transferable. Or the sending institution says, we need to, no, it's not transferring, we agree. And so it gives the opportunity at the administrative level to advocate for the student appropriately so around the transferability of a particular course. So the sending institution conducts an analysis. We do require in regulations that the institutions meet. We've set in guidance. This could be a phone call. This could be a virtual meeting. This doesn't need to be a whole to do, but the campuses need to talk. It can't just be these written communications. They need to talk with one another. There is an opportunity for a waiver of this. Should there be a course that the campuses have already agreed it's not going to transfer, we don't need to repeat this every single time. So there is an opportunity to waive out of this process. But that's the review of the denial.
Like, who talks?
Great question. So it starts with the transfer coordinators. So we've defined that role. The transfer coordinators, every campus is now required to have at least one transfer coordinator or a main transfer coordinator, and certainly the larger campuses will have many transfer coordinators. And so the transfer coordinators are supposed to facilitate this work, but it may be a department chair, it may be a dean, it may be a provost that engages in this process. So it's somebody with decision-making authority as well as somebody with content expertise. So that's why department chairs, faculty play an important role in this. They're the ones that teach the course, so they need to be engaged in this process to say my course is or is not equivalent, and here's why I think that. Transfer coordinators really do coordinate, but they're not it is very clear in our regulations, they're not the ones making this decision around course equivalency. And then the last step is a final determination letter. Again, depending what comes of that review, the receiving campus is supposed to issue out a final determination letter that again goes to the student and the sending institution. The final determination letter may revise its original evaluation depending on what happened with the conversations with the sending institution, or they may say, yeah, no, we're not accepting it and we're moving on, and that's it. So 5-step process. This is supposed to take about, I think we have it at either 60 or 90 days, because there are specific time frames for each of these steps. In essence, to ensure at worst, a student that starts at the beginning of a fall semester, they at least know by the end of that fall semester what will or will not change. In an ideal world, this analysis happens before they even enroll, so that they know what courses to enroll in their first semester upon transferring. Again, there's been some challenges around implementing this, making sure timelines are upheld, but it really is centered in student success and making sure students are as informed as possible.
One just process question. So I'm making this up. So let's assume a student wants to transfer. Let's say a student wants to know they want to transfer from PGCC to University of Maryland next year. They want to start next fall.
Right.
By doing the admission, does this automatically trigger this process, or do they have to do a separate process to start the whole transfer conversation in terms of what we'll go over?
Baseline, it is a separate process. We have heard from campuses that they are saying, listen, if you want to be admitted if you want to go through the admission process, just know you need to do this additional step over here, and so that there is a coordinated effort. But at baseline, it is a separate process.
So this process is in place now, correct?
Correct.
So ballpark, how many get denied?
So that is the question. That is the issue with our data collection. So we are doing an initial data collection in the aggregate. We have some submissions from the campuses. We are working through the file layout where we can get it not at the aggregate. So that is so we do not know the answer to that right now, and that is an active topic that we're trying to figure out and get guidance out to the campuses. It's tricky because, again, we are hearing from the campuses, they don't have the systems in place to track this with fidelity right now. So there is going to be a bit of a implementation pilot curve for campuses to track this information, record it within their learning management systems, and incorporate it. So we're still in guidance and development phase on the data collection.
Is that something the rest of the state government could help with?
Yes and no. It's a matter of, again, I think we have a good layout. We need to float it with the stakeholders, with the campuses, to make sure we're not asking them something that they can't do, or that we're going to get a whole bunch of blanks. So that's the next step, is just convening particularly the research staff as well as transfer coordinators and other individuals on the campuses to weigh in on the file layout.
Commissioner Howe.
So, if a student tries to transfer credits and is denied, and they're told this is why they didn't transfer, is there an appeal process for the student?
We have not created an appeal process in regulation. The campuses can create their own appeal process if they so choose. So we've not created an appeal process. We've said this is the process, but a campus could create an appeal process.
And if not now, eventually somebody will be keeping track of the number of denials, correct?
Exactly, and that is exactly what we are trying to figure out on how to capture that in a way that can inform our policy that we have set up here.
And what is suggested perhaps as a penalty if it's 90% of the courses that they try to transfer or deny? What's the problem? Who gets punished for that?
Great question. I would say this wouldn't be a punishment, but it would be a signal to the agency. Oh man, we've got a problem here. We've got misalignment. We've got misalignment that isn't serving students, and that's where, again, as a coordinating agency, we'd step in and say, let's figure this out. What's going on here? I will say, I think most campuses don't want to deny credit. They don't. And I think they are realizing it is just misalignment and getting faculty in the room. I will also share, as really what I would consider a grassroots effort, and I know I'm sitting, we've got two of my colleagues here in the audience. USM and the community colleges have worked not at our behest. They have pulled together faculty groups over the past year to say, okay, we got to get all of our business schools together, and we've got to figure out business statistics. What is going on with business statistics? We've got to get all of our psychology faculty together. What's going on with research methods? Is it transferring? Is it not? So they have done that on their own accord, I think in an effort so that they're not reporting denials. So I think they've gotten ahead of that a little bit to say, we've got to make alignments. I don't want us to reporting denials. This is not the space we want to be in. And they've done some of that work already, and that work is going to continue that will continue with these faculty affinity groups by discipline.
Thank you.
Yep.
I just read in the paper about a partnership between CCBC and Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
Does MHEC play a role in that?
Not explicitly. We support it, but we do not explicitly play a role. We want the campuses to do those relationships on their own. Those relationships are important, and what we are realizing the challenge is when it comes down to programmatic decisions. So universal admission, great. Those are great opportunities. We've seen success with that in Virginia, where a student enrolls both at the community college and at the four-year institution, and they're provided all the same services throughout their entire career. The tricky part is program. So if they start in one program and then decide to switch programs, even if it is a similar discipline, they stay within the social sciences. It's the same thing when a non-transfer student switches majors, they're gonna lose credit as well.
So typically, community college students, when they come in the beginning, they need to spend a little bit time and then decide what to take. And within that process, how do we allow that flexibility for them so that they don't lose as much credit? That's why there's a movement. A lot of colleges have implemented what is called meta majors. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether I want to be in nursing or not, but somewhere in health sciences. So health sciences programs will come up with courses that are applicable to all areas of health sciences for the first semester. So those things get transferred. So that is, I think, and the model from across the river that you just mentioned is a very good model. And I think we need to get there. The CCBC and Morgan partnership is really interesting, and we want to see more partnerships like that. But certainly the one that Dr. Dow mentioned from Virginia is a wonderful one. And from George Mason University, thanks to our colleagues in USM, they're bringing a president from that university. So as we continue talking to him, he's bringing those expertise here in Maryland, and we'll try to have that program. I think this is really, really good.
Dr. Dow, do you have any? Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe it was. Dr. Dow, do you have any suggestions about how this commission could help in making this process more student-centric or student-focused?
I should have been prepared for that question. Not immediately. I think, honestly, holding particularly me accountable to this process, I think is the one thing that we could be doing. This is a culture shift. We are asking not only 4 years, but community colleges as well to communicate and put students first. I think what would be helpful is an affirmation that we are headed in the right direction and that you support this work. It is important that faculty design academic programs in collaboration with workforce, informed by industry. But we also hear that faculty get very territorial. And there is an element around free speech and scholarship that play a role into how they teach their classes, the content that they bring into their classes, and the like. That's wonderful, and I think those are things that we should absolutely support. At the same time, we need to make sure that students have every opportunity to be successful. So I think just supporting this work and saying that campuses need to work together, that faculty need to talk to one another, that we can support faculty. There is a balance there in terms of scholarship and expertise and designing academic programs that lead to workforce outcomes, at the same time making it student-centered. In this context of we are a transfer state. Like this is a reality that we live in, and it's a context, and we have to recognize that and not live in bubbles.
And I think, Dr. Dow, at some point, we need to look at data, how many community college students from Maryland are transferring to other states.
Right.
Because we want to stop that. And if our process is complicated and somewhere else it's easier, that may happen. And as you know, it's happening at least in some of the online environment.
Absolutely. And I certainly hear from our community colleges. They say, and particularly the community colleges that are quite physically located to borders, Western Maryland, Northern Maryland, they're like, it's easier for me to have an articulation agreement with West Virginia. It's easier for me to have an articulation agreement with Delaware State.
So how can we change that?
Yeah. So communication, it's collaboration, it's getting the campuses to talk to one another, it's figuring out why. Why did you pick Del State? What is, and maybe there is a unique thing that's happening at Del State. Maybe it's driven by student interest, but we don't know that necessarily, and we as an agency do not have capacity to ask those questions at the regular for 16 community colleges and 12 public 4 years, 14 public 4 years.
Well, luckily, in the audience, we have Mr. Brad Phillips, who's the director of the Maryland Association of Community Colleges. So maybe we could work offline with you to enlist some sort of student focus groups or something I just don't think we as a commission can sit here and say, oh, well, maybe this is happening. Like, we got to fix this, right? That's why we took these jobs. So we'll talk with you offline.
Okay.
Commissioner Howe.
So, at the end of the day here, this is a tremendous amount of work to accumulate all these data points and discussions. But I can't see, as a result of all of it, that nothing will change other than you'll have a whole book of statistics that isn't really going to help the students have an ability to transfer the credits.
Right.
I think it's a worthwhile project. I think it's important to know what that number is. But unless there is some kind of an end game where you're going to take that amount of information and change something in a meaningful way for students who have paid for the courses to have an ability to transfer them into their major that they want to have in a four-year institution, in state or out of state. It's a great project, but I don't see the benefit of it at the end of the day if there's no change.
That is a fair point. And so the data collection, again, why we are so sensitive to designing a data collection that can help us inform this policy is important. Again, we could just leave it as the aggregate. Just tell us how many students got denied credit. Period, done, move on. We want substantive information to get to the heart of, are our institutions collaborating? Is there a constant denial of credit for a particular field or for a particular course? Are students getting denied because they've capped out? The school says we can't accept any more students. We are at capacity. So it's not about the credit, it's about we can't enroll you. And then that speaks to a larger or a different issue. So you're absolutely, and so I think we are sensitive in making sure that we are collecting information that we can use to inform particularly this process.
And also, at the end of the day, the student who has attempted to transfer the credit and been denied still has the burden of the debt that was incurred in taking the course and trying to pay back the money.
Absolutely.
And that's of deep concern to me. Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Kadia, our lawyer.
It's not a question, but I just wanted to note that actually one of the challenges in drafting all of this, this regulatory reform was that there's all of the information we have is anecdotal in the state. There's never been any centralized data on what is actually happening. So you may recall, because you were actually on the commission at the time when we introduced these, we had planned to make like a series of amendments as we gained more data, but part of this is making sure we understand what is actually happening before we're making the rules.
Before I conclude by my remarks, I do want to recognize Soma Kadia. She was essential in this whole process and making sure that these regulations were not only legally sound, but she held everyone accountable that they were student focused. So she really did come to the table, prepped, and she actually insisted that I meet with the registrars before these. So I just want to recognize her and her energy going above and beyond in terms of designing these reforms. So this is ongoing work. I have a few more slides. You'll see just in terms of, again, our big initiative right now is the data collection, trying to figure that out, getting it out to the campuses so that we do have non-anecdotal evidence about how this is working, as well as this idea of course equivalency and working with the Faculty Advisory Council.
Thank you, Dr. Dow, and thank you, Ms. Kadia. I do think we have a question from Dr. Dukes.
It's not a question. Thank you for recognizing me. It's just a comment. It is no secret to any of you that I've been in the community college world for most of my career in higher education. And what I will tell you is that what I heard today was a higher level of expectation around collaboration and accountability for the students who are enrolled in our institutions across the state of Maryland. So I really appreciated the report as well. And it has the potential to move in a direction that many of us have been focused on and wanting for a long time. So I too want to thank Dr. Dow, Dr. Rai, and others on the team for the work that's been done relative to the presentation that was made today.
Thank you, Dr. Dukes. Vice Chair Agu?
Sure. I really want to echo the thanks. This is a lot of work, as well as when I look at this, and I'm on the 70% slides, I think it's actually is really important. I've never heard of anything like this. And I actually think of all the things you've proposed, the one forcing mechanism to actually force a behavior change at certain institutions. I would say one of the things I think about is the rule is helpful to the extent that it can be enforced. And that is personnel, resources, time, focus. As someone used to work in an enforcement agency. And so as we think about, when session comes, and as we think about holding institutions, I don't know if it's an audit, I don't know what it is, but making sure the institutions actually adhere to this 70% rule in terms of evaluation, I think it's going to be really important. So just as a very tactical thing. And so we're happy to talk to you about how we can make sure that MHEC is in a place to make sure that this is actually followed and enforced is really important. Because I think this is revolutionary if done well at the institution level.
Thank you.
Any other questions from my colleagues? All right, thank you very much, Dr. Dow.
Thank you.
Our next meeting will be an all virtual meeting on Wednesday, December 6th at 10 in the morning. And then we also need to get the dates out for next year. I don't believe we have the 24 dates that have been circulated, so we'll work on that as well. So thank you very much for your attention. This meeting is adjourned. Sorry, I guess we need to move to adjourn. Is there a motion? Thank you, Commissioner Burnham. Is there a second? Any opposition? Okay, thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
I get it. I do get it. It's just annoying.